Warning: the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation, home of unprotected talk, borders, language, culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
As one of my predecessors, Franklin Roosevelt, once said, remember always that all of us, and you and I especially, are descended from immigrants and revolutionists. Immigrants and revolutionists. Now, that's not the story of looking backwards. That's the story of looking forward. That's what we're doing today.
So there is your leader, your communist street agitator, Al Sharpton, with a smoother act at a Cinco de Mayo thing. He already burnt Baltimore half to the ground, stirred up the African-American mobs. So now he goes to the Hispanics and tells them that their ancestry is that of revolutionists. Is there any further evidence I can produce for you to show you that you're living through a low-grade, slow-rolling, communist civil war provoked by the president and the first lady? Now, you're not supposed to mention the first lady. After all, she's, I don't know what her campaign is about. It's school lunches, sorry. Right, the last one, it was books. Books, except conservative books. That was Laura Bush. All books were her thing. They all picked something to do. This first lady now goes to the Whitney Museum and says she felt unwelcome because she's black. I swear to God, the first lady of the United States, spoiled through and through, never toiled a day in her life, all handed to her. Listen to clip 3. I'm not making any of this up. Listen.
You see, there are so many kids in this country who look at places like museums and concert halls and other cultural centers, and they think to themselves, well, that's not a place for me.
Shame on you.
For someone who looks like me, for someone who comes from my neighborhood. In fact, I guarantee you that right now there are kids living less than a mile from here who would never in a million years dream that they would be welcome in this museum.
Shame on you.
And growing up on the south side of Chicago, I was one of those kids myself.
What a liar. What a liar. I can't imagine what it must be like to be a black person in America under these communist liars. I don't understand it. I don't understand how the black people in this country don't rise up and scream from the top of their lungs at these two. She feels uncomfortable in the Whitney Museum. Did she think she was at the Whitey Museum? Is that the mistake I'm making here? She wasn't at the Whitey Museum. She was at the Whitney Museum. And she was a slum kid who felt uncomfortable going to museums? All of it's fabricated. Okay. Now you go to the next stage on the Savage Nation. And that is this. Last night, I was pleased to see that the Drudge Report linked the story about my statements that were published on WorldNet Daily. And it's still up there. I think it's still up there. I'm looking for, maybe it was dropped here. Savage, Obama will arm gangs for race war. Now people say, what is he, crazy? What is this, the Turner Diaries? What is he, nuts? Well, if you actually listen to what I said, you'll find out that I'm not too far from the truth. What do you mean I'm not too far from the truth? What do you mean he's going to deputize gangs in the streets? What do you think I really meant? Well, I suggest you go to the Drudge Report and look at the story, or go to WND, and now you listen to me, because this morning as I woke up, I was feeding the birds, as I normally do, to get away from politics and humans, and I turned on my local radio station on which I appear, KSFO, which is just the best station in the country, unbelievable, and the morning crew was covering that story, and I want you to hear what we talked about. Clip 1.
I love it. We're getting a house call from Dr. Savage. Good morning, Michael Savage. We were just invoking your name. How are you?
Well, that's why I called. You know, it's early morning for me. My show's at noon. Turn you on. As I was noticing that the bay hasn't risen at all this morning from the melting of the ice caps. That's good to know. And I was throwing used pita bread to the seagulls and laughing to myself. how much they love gluten. It hasn't seemed to kill the seagulls yet. I heard you talking about the link on Drudge, and I'm glad you said that it's not too far-fetched, the idea that this gangster regime would arm the gangs.
Right.
Let's think about it. You're right. In context, it's already happening. When you have the police of San Francisco being told to wear uniforms they'd wear to a funeral to control a crowd, tell me who they're tipping the scales in favor of.
Right.
The mad leftist hordes, the vermin, the vermin who don't work for a living, the rats, the street garbage that's supposed to be controlled. The police are there to protect us from those scum. And now the mayor is telling the police, don't protect us from the scum. Let them burn and wreck and beat up police horses. Tell me if that's not a civil war. I'm going crazy from this.
Well, it's as if your book, Stop the Coming Civil War, is coming to life. I mean, that book in many ways was prophetic, or I should say is prophetic, Doctor.
Well, I don't know whether it's prophetic. I know that this thing in the White House has been at war with America from the day he graduated Columbia and found out that by going to the radical side of his nature, everyone started kissing his feet. By his own admission, in his own autobiography, he said he was never a black radical as a young man. He didn't have to be. His white grandmother took good care of him, didn't she? Yep. After his father abandoned him and fled to Kenya. I mean, let's be clear. You want to call it racist? It's not racist. Let's talk realist about his own autobiography. He was very well cared for, went to an expensive private school in Honolulu. I had to leave Honolulu because my son was going to enter the first grade and I couldn't afford a private school. Okay? That's when I moved to California. We didn't have the money to send him to a private school. And I wouldn't send him to a public school because, to be very frank with you, the racism against whites in Honolulu is overwhelming. Ask anyone who lives there. But let's put that aside. By his own admission, he was not a black radical as a youngster. It was at Columbia that he became radicalized when he found out by identifying with the leftist black radicals, suddenly the whites kissed his feet. He's ridden it all the way to the White House. Why should he stop now?
You're exactly right. Now, let's get back to the point that you made, which is making national headlines. And, you know, there are a lot of times when you'll say things on your program and it goes national or even international. But when you talked about Barack Obama putting together something that would look like arming U.S. gangs for a race war, didn't it remind you of, I mean, you had to be thinking of that comment that Barack Obama made, which we just played in 2008, where he's talking about this gargantuan civilian force, much like a military.
Well, of course, that's what I was thinking about, and I'm kind of playing with people's heads a little bit to make them understand that the street gangs are an army. It's an armed army that the police keep in check.
And so so what you're saying is they're already in place, they're already here, it's already happening.
Have weapons, for God's sakes. They're loaded to the teeth with guns. Look at those two Muslims with machine guns in Texas. Where'd they get the machine guns from?
Good point. Good point.
And who's supposed to control them? A traffic cop in Texas shot them dead by 2 headshots with their body armor. Well, which is one good thing we learned about is that if you're driving through Texas, you better obey all traffic rules. That's all I can say. But the thing is, let's not make a joke about what's going on here. You know, I know you're trying to be deadly serious. It's very early in the morning. My friends, they're here. They're armed. They're called gangs. They're loaded to the rafters with weapons and ammunition, body armor, you name it. Who keeps them in check? The local police, not the federales. So now the federales are telling the police to stand down.
Right.
So is there an army? The army is here. It's not like tomorrow. He doesn't have to give them a uniform. All he has to do is tell the police not to do anything.
Headline, Savage says Obama may arm U.S. gangs for race war. My point is they're here. You saw it in Baltimore, didn't you? The police were sent to face the mobs without body armor, without helmets, and they were told to stand down. The city burned. San Francisco is going to have a day of action, so-called, tomorrow, which is right out of the communist playbook. Direct action is a phrase from the communist revolution. And the police were told to wear dress uniforms when they face the hordes of vermin in the gutters tomorrow. In other words, let the vermin break windows. Let the vermin do whatever they want. Don't stand up to them. We have a society that's melting down. It goes all the way back to the statement that a fish rots from the head down. That's the opening to my show. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
Hey, our Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com, the only company I trust for wealth insurance, gold and silver. Call 800-BUYCOIN. So you've got the president stirring up gangs in the inner city. Then he goes to the Cinco de Mayo and tells Hispanics that they come from revolutionaries and we're not talking. Hey, listen to what he says. You got to hear it again. Don't miss this. Listen.
As one of my predecessors, Franklin Roosevelt, once said,
listen, come on, play
remember
it.
Always,
Obama,
that all of us, and you and I especially, are descended from immigrants and revolutionists. Immigrants and revolutionists. Now, that's not the story of looking backwards. That's the story of looking forward.
Did you hear what he just said?
That's what we're doing today.
This nasty piece of work triples down, and he's not glorifying the American Revolution. He's talking about the new American Revolution, which he's leading. How stupid can you be, you idiots out there? You dumb liberals, I blame you. You're burning the country down. You morons, you. All you nice liberal idiots, you. So, how you feeling today? And the First Lady says that she's not welcome in museums, that black people are not welcome in museums. She came from a slum and wasn't welcome in a museum. Who the hell does she think she's fooling? Listen to clip 3, liberal morons.
There are so many kids in this country who look at places like museums and concert halls and other cultural centers, and they think to themselves, well, that's not a place for me.
Sickening.
For someone who looks like me, for someone who comes from my neighborhood. In fact, I guarantee you that right now there are kids living less than a mile from here who would never in a million years dream that they would be welcome in this museum. And growing up on the south side of Chicago, I was one of those kids myself.
What a liar. Doesn't anyone out there have any shame? Is there not a liberal in New York City or Chicago who has any shame, who says, I've had enough of these two rabble-rousers, that I'm sick of them? They're liars through and through. They're revolutionaries. They're wanting to burn the country down before they leave office. You know, there was a very telling New Yorker cartoon just before the first election when these two was foisted upon us. And it showed Barack Obama with a large afro looking like Stokely Carmichael from the 60s. And it showed Michelle Obama caricatured as Angela Davis with a bandolier of ammunition. You remember the cartoon? How the New Yorker said they were just kidding? They were trying to show you how white people viewed them. How chillingly accurate that was. How chillingly frightening it is to think that day after day, minute by minute, hour by hour, it gets worse. And there's not a word out of the establishment as to what they're doing to this country. Now, I could ask you a question or two, like as a black middle-class person, do you feel excluded from a museum? Are you crazy? What, is there a sign that says blacks not allowed? Is she out of her mind? I go to museums. They bend over backwards, in fact, to the point where it's nauseating. Every other exhibit's about the wonders of the Latino culture, the wonders of Mexico, the wonders of Africa, the wonders of the Middle East. It's as though there were no white people on the planet. It's as though there was no European civilization until he became president. Now the fools in the museum, every other exhibit is about the wonders of everything except the European man, the European woman. There are no Europeans permitted, no exhibits. Why don't they just take all of the great works of art and throw them away, burn them, have an art burning? Why don't invite the mobs in and let them burn the art, the evil art of Rembrandt and Van Gogh? Just burn it. It's just, dead white males that did it. Burn all the art. Replace it with the filth that's coming out of the art schools today. Well, I think I made my point. I can ask you a question or two. Black people, did you feel excluded from museums as a child? Are you ashamed to go to a museum? This spoiled, rich lady, Michelle Obama, who never really toiled in her life, says she came from the South Side and she was afraid to go to a museum? Are you not embarrassed to say you're a Democrat?